Welcome everybody to Kidlit Distancing Social for August 13th. My name is John Bard. I'm one of the owners of Children's Book Insider. And tonight you're going to be hearing from my partner, my wife, Laura Backus. It's going to be a geek out session. This is for the writing nerds tonight. We're going to dig deep into opening lines and strong beginnings. You're going to love it. If you love to kind of dig deep into the craft of writing, you're really going to enjoy tonight. So sit back and get ready for that. Again, we have the chat box open. Please go ahead and let me know where you're coming from so we can say hello to you. For questions, if you have questions that you want answered, Laura will be doing Q&A at the end. Use the Q&A box. Thank you, Marcia, for your nice words. Go ahead and use the Q&A box, and that way Laura can get to that at the end of the evening. Just a heads up for our subscribers, Children's Book Insider subscribers, the August issue of CBI is available. Check your inbox for the download link, and you can see kind of what's available in there. The above the slush pile code this month is from Move Books. Eileen Robinson, who was a guest on the social a few weeks back, is kind enough to have given us an above the slush pile submission code so our people can submit to her and get right on the top. And you can also just take a look at what's in the current issue of CBI. I know a lot of folks love Mary Cole. She was our guest a while ago. Mary has an article in the current issue on choosing comp titles for your query letter. And actually also we have, one of the things we're doing this year that's kind of fun is our 30th anniversary flashbacks. This is our 30th year of publishing CBI. So every month Laura is going through the first year of CBI and pulling out some of her favorite articles from back then. And in this month's issue, we revisit an interview we did with Barbara Suling. I'm sure a lot of you knew Barbara Suling. Great interview and a nice flashback to 30 years ago. Now, again, so if you are a CBI subscriber, this is waiting for you. If you are not a CBI subscriber and you want to become one so you can get this issue and all the issues, we do have a special offer for our socialites. And there it is, just for $5 a month. You will get every issue downloadable in PDF, and you will also get access to the CBI Clubhouse, which you see on the left there, which is where we have the Children's Writing Knowledge Base, which is a massive massive database of how-to information about writing children's books. We have lots of webinars, ebooks, all kinds of stuff in there. It'll keep you busy for a long time, maybe 30 years worth. Glynis says, I love those articles, yes. So anyway, $5 a month and you get everything. So please check that out. It's the best deal we've got, but it's again, just for you guys. writeforkids.org/CBI. And I think I skipped one here. There we go. For those of you who are not CBI subscribers and are not on our mailing list, because maybe you're finding us now or maybe watching us on YouTube, you can get on our list and get a free gift, the Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet. Just go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet, and you will get it. It's great. It's packed with information. It's totally free. And also this way you'll be getting every week the notifications with the guest on the social and the link to the replay. And also when we have other stuff happening, you will find out about it. So that's the link, writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. Again, to join CBI, which we really hope you do, for only $5 a month, writeforkids.org/CBI. That's it for me. In fact, what I'm going to do now in the official changeover, this is our ritual. I got to change the name because it's not John Bard you're going to be hearing from. You are going to be hearing from my wife, Laura Backus. There we go. Now we're ready for you, Laura. Enjoy.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm glad you're all here tonight. I see Carol loves being called a socialite. Well, yes, don't we all? I mean, who would have thought the pandemic would make us all socialites? But there you go. I bequeath that name to all of you. So, welcome. Normally during this section, hey Beth, we turn off the camera and I reappear with my green screen and I am somewhere in the world with a literary landmark. But some of you have sent me some literary or writing themed pictures. And so now we're going to do Where in the World Are You? I'm very excited about this. So first one, see if you all can guess where this is. Sheila Lewis sent this in. And in the chat box, if you recognize this place, please let me know. It has a somewhat literary theme to it. The name has a literary connotation. And this is where Sheila likes to go to write. So, and if nobody can guess here in the chat box, I will tell you the name. This is in Central Park in New York City, and it is called Shakespeare's Gardens. Isn't that lovely? No, Sonia, we have, oh, Pat, the Secret Garden. That would be a great name for it, wouldn't it? We have the chat box set, so only I can see your comments and I will relay them to everyone else. We just have to do that right now until the world gets a little nicer. But I will convey your comments to everybody. So thank you, Sheila. She says, the blue sky, fresh air, and lovely stillness of nearby duck ponds and flower gardens have nurtured my writing, even in the heart of the pandemic in the Big Apple. So I'm really glad that you get to go there, Sheila. It is a lovely garden, Shakespeare's Gardens. And here's another one from our friend, Steve Swinburne. A lot of you know who he is. Where do you think he is? This picture was clearly taken at night. There's Steve on the left and a large creature on the right. So yes, it is a beach, but can you guess which beach? The large creature on the right might give you a clue. Oh, I'll wait a second and see if you guys can come up with a couple more guesses here. Costa Rica. Nice, it's a good guess. Galapagos. Oh, I see some good guesses here. Yes, yes. He is in St. Kitts in the middle, in the middle of the night working. He put that in quotes. A mama sea turtle as she lays her 125 eggs. And this was during research when he was researching this book, Sea Turtle Scientist. And he profiled Dr. Kimberly Stewart, who was also in the photograph there, in this book that he wrote for the Scientists in the Field series. And it's a great book. So if you are a nonfiction author, this is what you get to do for research. Is that not the coolest thing? So thanks, Steve, for sending that in. I appreciate it. And hopefully you'll get to do some great research trips again soon. So keep sending me those pictures. We do this every week, and I really could use your help with some of these little features we do. So take a picture of yourself, either in front of a literary landmark, if you happen to live near something, or somewhere that inspires your writing. We like to know about where you go to write. This is a social, after all. We need to get to know each other. Or doing some writing-related activity. Anything like that. We would love to see your pictures. Email it to me with a brief description of where you are and permission to use the photo. And you can either attach it as a JPEG or send me the link to where I can download it, and send that to mail@writeforkids.org and put where in the world in the subject line. And we will feature you on, oh, there's Steve, yay, on a future distancing social. I like to see where you guys are. So you can see me, I can't see you. So send me your pictures. Okay, so if you are a regular on the socials, you know that we have a celebrate section every week where we celebrate our members' accomplishments, milestones, publications, and we have celebrated a lot of really cool stuff in the last, what is this, number 17? 17 weeks? I think this is the 17th social. Anyway, you guys didn't send me anything this week. And I'm thinking you do not understand the spirit of the celebrate. So in the chat box, I want you to answer some questions for me. A lot of you listened to Nick Brule's talk last week, which was amazing. And if you haven't, you need to go check out the replay. But were any of you inspired after listening to Nick and came up with some interesting story ideas. He shared his whole process with you. Oh, Melissa says she was chosen as the 2020 PB Chat mentee to the amazing author Anna Marie Riley, I think, Gerton. So thank you, Melissa. That's awesome. That is a really great, great thing to celebrate. I see some came up with 2 picture book ideas, Glynis says. Yay. Doria made a list. Nick talks about how he always starts with a list. Great, great. So those are some great things to celebrate right there. Tremendous accomplishments. Who read a book this week? There we go. Regina checked out 2 books on learning to draw. Excellent. Isn't that awesome? I was going to say, who read a book that maybe inspired you or exposed you to an author you'd never heard of before? Terry read her friend, a published author, asked her to illustrate her new idea. Excellent, excellent. Beth says she found her way back into her middle grade novel in progress and has been writing up a storm this week. Yay, Beth, good for you. Alexine says she read so many she lost count. Oh, I am jealous. Danielle, The Happiest Man on Earth, read that. Ellen says, I celebrated having funny writing sessions Friday. Oh, yes, you emailed me about your funny writing sessions. Great, and she made great progress on that story. Awesome. Tanya Ann is reading Chris Grabenstein's Mr. Lemoncello's series. Excellent. Dottie read American Dirt. Mary's reading Big Magic. Fractured Fairy Tales by Jane Yolen. Terry's reading. Excellent. Excellent. Eulinda read Crown, Ode to the Fresh Cut. That is an excellent picture book. Carol's reading tons of books, searching for mentor texts, being inspired. Wow, you guys have been reading a lot of books. Teresa's working on revisions on book 2. Excellent. Alexine's working on turning a picture book into a chapter book. See, you have plenty to celebrate. I'm so excited to hear this. So email me about this stuff because I would love to post it up here with your name and your progress. Not only do we get to celebrate with you, but you will be an inspiration to everyone else who is watching. And we love that. Rosie is reading White Stallion of Lepizia. I know I'm not saying that right. Great. I'm so excited to hear all that. So send us your good news. Again, it doesn't have to be a publication of a book, though. Of course, we want to hear about that. Any of these milestones, any little progress you're making, it all counts. And one of the reasons we do this, Distancing Social, is to build community, to help keep your creative juices flowing. And like I said, when we hear about what other people are doing, it inspires us and it gives us ideas for our own work. So email me, mail@writeforkids.org, and put celebrate in the subject line. I'm hoping to hear from a lot of you this week. Okay. So here's something that we are celebrating at CBI. We have a webinar coming up. If you are a picture book writer, you're going to want to be in on this. Do you want to add emotional impact to your picture book manuscripts? So in case you don't know this, we all want our picture books to be read over and over and over. And that's what editors are looking for. They don't want to publish a book that's going to be read once. Picture books are expensive. They're expensive to produce. They cost a lot of money to purchase. They want books that are going to be read over and over. And those that are read over and over are those that tap into universal human emotions. So on Tuesday, August 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, award-winning best-selling author Pat Zeitlo-Miller is going to lead a webinar for us on how to find the heart in your stories and incorporate that emotional heart into your text. So this will be a paid webinar. So if you're on our mailing list, you will get information next week about it. Keep an eye out on your emails. Or if you're a subscriber, we'll send you notification as well. It will be $47 to attend the live event, and it will be recorded. So if you can't actually watch it live, you will get the replay. And then we always record our webinars and then put them on our writingblueprints.com site and continue to sell the recordings. However, it will be $67 once it goes there. So if you want to get the deal, you want to sign up for the live event. So again, if you're on our mailing list, you will get notice about that next week. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be great. I've seen her slides. I know they're really good. Okay. And I am very excited about that. Okay. We're going to take a poll. So this one comes courtesy of Regina Montana. So thank you. These are spoofs on famous first lines, writer's edition. So I want you to vote for your favorite spoof here. And if you can guess what the real first line is or what book the actual first line was from, please put it in the chat box because I would love to hear your guesses on this. Now, can you all see the poll? Please put in the chat. Oh, there you go. Now the voting's starting. Awesome. So these are spoofs on famous first lines that have been rewritten as if they're about a writer. And again, if you can guess what the actual first line was or what book it was actually from, please put that in the chat box. For some reason, my poll is not showing the last one very well, but I can see that you're voting for it. I don't know why. Yep, Mary, Mary and Beth got the first one. They know what that's from. Carolyn got, yep, you got one on Carolyn. And Pat, you're right, Pat. We got some good, yes, Kathy, you got it for the second one. Good job. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right. So here it is. So the last one won. In the light of the moon, a little idea lay in my head. And someone guessed that was Goodnight Moon, but it's not. So can any of you guess what book that might be from? No one's getting. That is actually a spoof on the first line of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And the first one is Charlotte's Web. Second one is, Danielle, you got it. The second one is Goodnight Moon. The third one is Pride and Prejudice. No, fourth one is Pride and Prejudice. The third one is Peter Pan. And then, of course, we have The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So thank you, Regina, for that fun poll. And it just happened to tie in with what we're talking about tonight. So that was pretty cool. Okay, here's a few links of interest that I sort of round up for you every week. So there's a great post on Nathan Bransford's blog from August 3rd called "There's No Excuse for Not Knowing Where Your Book Fits in the Market." And this is a really good overview, especially for those of you who are kind of new to publishing, about how to understand your genre that you're writing in, sort of figure out who the publishers are who produce books like yours and understand what an imprint is and a publishing house, and also how to research other authors who have written similar books so you can target your submissions and list comp titles in your query letter. If you don't know what a comp title is, I refer you back to the article by Mary Cole in this month's issue of Children's Book Insider. So those are all important things you need to know, especially as you're starting to query. So that is a great blog post for you to check out. How to Do Honest and Legal Giveaways as an Author by Chris Fay is on Jane Friedman's blog, and you see the link there. It was an August 3rd post as well. And this explains the best way to handle book giveaways using Rafflecopter. So a lot of authors, as they are releasing their books and doing especially virtual appearances right now, they might do a book giveaway as a way to generate interest in their new book, build your mailing list. There's a lot of great reasons to do book giveaways. And Rafflecopter is the most commonly used platform to do that. This is a great post that tells you how to set those up and sort of even the legal language you need to be using in your giveaways so that you are covered as people, you know, do what they need to do in order to enter that contest. So check that out. And this is a really cool article from a site called theconversation.com. From Wild Horses to Wild Things, a window into Maurice Sendak's creative process. And it examines how Sendak took 8 years to create Where the Wild Things Are, and how he continually evolved and challenged himself as an artist. And it's fascinating. And originally, way back at the beginning, it was called Where the Wild Horses Are. And here is a sketch from an early dummy. And you can see that the boy is pulling the tails of the horses and the horse is kicking the boy and the boy's clothes come off. Very Sendak-like. And he decided not to pursue that because he didn't feel he could draw horses very well. But it's a fascinating article, and it all talks, I guess, at the University of Connecticut. I believe it's the University of Connecticut. I did not write down the details. They have all of his manuscripts and his book dummies and everything in one of their libraries there. And so it was 2 of the professors from that university wrote this article. So it's really cool. If you're a Sendak nerd, check that out. And the bit.ly link I made, I forgot to put it in bold there, that goes straight to it. It's bit.ly/Sendak Creative Process. That'll take you right there. It's really cool. Okay, so let's talk beginnings. And again, if you have questions for me, please put them in the Q&A. And in a little while, I will ask you to type your favorite opening lines in the chat box, and we can talk about those. But first, let's talk about what are we really talking about when we say strong beginnings. We are talking about your book's first line, your book's first paragraph, excuse me, which in a picture book might be just the second line, and your book's opening scene. All these 3 elements must build upon each other to hook the reader and to entice the reader to invest in your story. Now, why are these very small components of your entire book so vital? Well, first of all, think about how we purchase books today. I'll tell you how I purchase books. Maybe someone I know says, oh, this is a great book, you should check it out. Maybe I read a review and I go, oh, that looks interesting. Or maybe I am just browsing and looking for a new book, okay? Usually what I do first is I go on Amazon and I will read the description of the book, and then I will click on Look Inside. And I am going to read the first page or 2 of that book. At that point, if I go, ooh, this is interesting, then I might continue to read some of the reviews. And then if I'm going to buy the book, I may decide to actually get it from my local bookstore, but I will have used Amazon to do my research, okay? Or I might say, oh, I'm going to see if the library has that. I mean, I might get the book in a lot of different places, but I do utilize Amazon's Look Inside feature to get a sample of the story and the writing. Now, when I am in a bookstore and browsing through the shelves, I do the same thing. First, I'm often intrigued by a title if I don't recognize the author. So we might do another distancing social at some point just on titles. But anyway, I'll pull it off the shelf. I'll read the little blurb inside the jacket to get a sense of what the book's about. I'll open the book and I'll read the first couple pages. If I am not grabbed, I'm putting that book back on the shelf. And I know I'm not the only one who does this. This is the way most people shop, unless someone specifically says to them, you absolutely have to read this book, and you really trust their judgment, and then you might just get the book. How do editors read manuscripts? Well, you are submitting a query letter, and very often with the query, you're submitting your first few pages. So they are getting that same sense of your story as potential book buyers are getting with those first few pages. So they are vital. Now, it's also vital that whatever you set up in the pages, you carry through the rest of the book. But those first few pages, if an editor loves them, they're going to request the entire manuscript. So these are really important. When you are looking at mentor texts to model your beginnings after, a lot of, you'll hear a lot of editors and agents and writing instructors say it's really important that you study books published in the last, 10 years or so. And that is very true, because styles of writing have changed. The way we pull a reader into a story is a little bit different now than it was 50 years ago. So you want to definitely get a sense of what is working today, what editors are looking for today. But I'm going to teach you tonight how to sort of analyze beginnings. And once you understand what makes a good beginning, then you can go back and read some of your favorite books from your childhood and see if the beginnings work by today's standards. Some of them do. And the ones that hold up are important to study because they're the ones that created the foundation for how authors are writing today. And they were really often ahead of their time. So we are going to look at some books tonight, and I'm going to look at some classic books that held up, as well as some newer titles, and we will analyze them. So when crafting your book's beginning, you need to ask yourself two questions. First, how will you begin your story? And second, where will you begin your story? And there's no one-size-fits-all answer to these questions. Every book is different, but it has to be a deliberate choice on your part. And the answers to these two questions have to fit the story you are telling. And I can tell you that you are not going to be able to answer these questions in your first draft. So don't even worry about it. You want to get your first draft down. So just begin your book as best you think you can right now as you are writing your first draft. And then once you have revised your story, really fixed all those plot holes, tightened your character arc, made your scenes as tight as possible, and have everything in the book do what it's supposed to do, then you can go back to your beginning. And then you can ask the questions, because in your first draft, you might not know the answers, because you might not even fully understand where your story's going with your first draft. So don't worry about getting this perfect until you are at least on about your third or fourth revision of your manuscript. So let's start with the how. The way you figure out how is you ask yourself, what do I want my reader to feel at the beginning of my book? So your reader comes into your book as a blank slate. They're completely in your hands. They have either no expectation or very little expectation, maybe just from having read a little synopsis of the story or a couple reviews. So it is up to you to lay that emotional groundwork right from the start. And again, this is a very deliberate choice you are making. You don't want to leave this up to chance. So determining how you want your reader to feel in that opening scene will help you figure out what literary device you are going to use to make them feel that. So here are some examples of the types of emotions you might want to stir up in your reader at the very beginning of your book. These are all positive things. Even shock. Shock is sort of a, but it's really, they were, incredibly surprised by what happened at the beginning. Okay. Goosebumps is more spine tingly, suspense. So you can run the gamut of emotions here. It is up to you. And it also depends on the age group you're writing for and the genre you're writing in. So there's a lot of choices to be made here, but you want to know what you are trying to elicit from your reader. What you don't want is annoyance, confusion, or boredom. Okay, those are negative. And trust me, I've read a lot of manuscripts and quite a few published books where I get through the first few pages and I am either completely confused or bored. And that makes me really annoyed, especially if I bought the book. So you don't want the reader to feel those things right off the bat. You don't want them to feel those things at any point in your book, but especially at the beginning. So here's some literary devices you can use to create that emotion. You can use dialogue. You can use action and medias res, dropping the reader right into the middle of a scene, right into the middle of the action. You can use your character, and we'll have a couple examples of that so you understand what I'm talking about there, as well as the voice and tone of your writing. And very often you are going to use more than one of these, okay? Opening with static description or backstory almost never works and is an outdated style of writing, okay? So if this is why you need to understand how modern books are written before you go back and re-examine the classics that you love, because some of those are going to open with a lot of description. They're setting the scene and nothing is really happening. And that was a style at one point. It's not the style anymore. So that's why understanding modern books is so important. Backstory, the same way. We can't care about the character's backstory until we first care about the character right now. So expecting us to care about what happened 10 years ago to someone we haven't met yet is not going to work. And remember, kids are way more critical of this stuff than adults are. Adults might actually stick around and say, well, let's see if it picks up in chapter 2. Yeah, kids aren't going to do that. So, however, your opening scene, even though you don't want static description where it's not moving the story forward, or backstory, your opening scene should reveal who the main character is. Give us a sense of who we're following in this story, and begin to root your reader in the story's time and place. Remember, you don't want your readers to be confused. That doesn't mean you have to give them every detail of where they are and what time period this book is being told in, but you have to start giving them a sense. Now, if your book is set in modern day, you don't have to say that. Okay, readers are going to assume it's a contemporary story. And of course, you're going to have a few details. Your character might be texting, okay? Or I'm guessing in a couple of years, we're going to have a few YA novels where our characters are living through a pandemic. Okay, so those are going to kind of root the story for us. If your story takes place in the past, then you're going to start weaving in a few small details right up front so that the reader immediately knows we're talking about a different time period. And those can be very subtle, but again, you don't want your reader to go in thinking it's a contemporary story, and then all of a sudden the horse and buggy pulls up and your character gets in and they're like, well, wait a minute, I thought they were going to call an Uber. So this is very confusing. You don't want that to happen. So a strong opening does three things. It packs a wallop with the first line. It doubles down with the next few sentences, and it follows through for the first scene. So you don't want to just spend all your time crafting a perfect first line and then thinking you're done. Because if you don't follow through with that, all of your impact and your emotion that you gathered in that first line is going to dissolve. You need to keep it going. Now, packing a wallop means different things for different stories. So that's why I'm going to show you a bunch of different examples, because the tone of the story and the audience and the genre and everything else determine what wallop means. Okay. So we're going to start with one that I'm sure you all know, but we're going to really, we're really going to dive in word for word by word, and see why this opening is so brilliant. But I have another slide first. I already said this, did I? Okay, never mind. Okay, Charlotte's Web, we all know this one. So very often when I see lists of best first lines, obviously this one comes up. It's considered one of the best openings in a middle grade novel ever. Okay, and it was published almost 70 years ago, so it is held up. This is one of those that you can study. A lot of times when people quote the first line, they just quote this part, "Where's Papa going with that axe?" And that is a brilliant piece of dialogue to open a book with. But you can't truly appreciate the genius of the first line until you look at the entire thing all at once. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. Okay, but let's back up a second. Notice the chapter title, Before Breakfast. So already going into the book, E.B. White is telling us this is happening first thing in the morning. Okay. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" is a wonderful piece of dialogue, and it immediately tells us that the speaker is a child and is the either son or daughter of this person walking around with an axe. Okay, so that starts to ground us in the story. Then we have "said Fern to her mother." So we know Fern is our speaker. That starts grounding us in the story even more. But here's the kicker. "As they were setting the table for breakfast." To me, that is what makes this line so much more powerful, because you have this one image of Dad walking around with an axe, and we don't know where he's walking yet. We just know Fern happened to see him. Frankly, it doesn't matter where he is. He's walking around with an axe. And then you have this nice, ordinary, everyday morning scene of Fern and her mother setting the table for breakfast. So right away, we have questions, okay? And it's okay to raise questions in the reader's mind if they are interesting questions. If they're not questions of, I don't know where I am, but if they are questions of, what is happening? That's okay if it's intriguing, okay? But if you raise a question like that, you need to answer it pretty quickly. And the younger the age you're writing for, the faster you need to answer that question. So here's the rest of that scene. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. The first line packs a wallop. "Out to the hog house," replied Mrs. Arable. "Some pigs were born last night." He just doubled down on that first line. Okay, now we know where Papa's going, and we are going, what? We also know that they are living on a farm. So it has rooted us even more in where we are. "I don't see why he needs an axe," continued Fern, who was only 8. Okay, so what's interesting about that, continued Fern, who was only 8, that's kind of a dated way of getting in the character's age. Authors today would work that in some other way. But the fact that she is 8 is important because she is representing the reader here. This is an early middle grade book. Most of the kids reading these books are somewhere between the ages of 8 and 10. Okay, so Fern is representing the reader, and the reader is like, okay, so you don't know what's happening either. Okay, so I don't feel so lost now. I'm confused too. Why is Papa walking around with an axe out to the hog house? This is bad. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it. Okay, he just doubled down again. He's tripled down on this scene. Okay. Do away with it, shrieked Fern. You mean kill it just because it's smaller than the others? Okay, Fern's not buying any of this sugar-coated language here. She's calling it like she sees it. He's going to kill this pig. So again, the reader's like, thank you. Thank you for calling your mom on this. Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern, she said. Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway. Boom, that is a huge opening scene. There's a lot going on there. And what we are feeling right now is the same thing Fern is feeling. We are horrified that Papa's going to kill this pig and we want to save it, which is in the next scene exactly what she does as she runs out the door. So this is one of those openings where the author wanted the reader to be shocked, to be just as shocked as the character. And when you are a kid and you're reading this, you are not going to stop until you're sure that the pig is okay. And then you're probably pretty invested in the story, and so you're going to keep reading. And the double down over and over and over just builds the tension beautifully. The other thing he does with this opening, and you don't have to do this with your openings, but I think it's really smart that he did it here. This book deals with some pretty hefty themes. We have life and death, we have the cycle of life, we have the cycle of life on a farm, which is a different thing altogether than the cycle of life out in the wild. We have themes of fairness, justice. That's before we even get into the whole friendship theme. And that's a lot for a middle grade reader to digest. And so what E.B. White did here is he was very upfront about, these are things we're going to talk about in this book. And it allows the reader to make the choice of whether or not they can handle that before they keep reading. We don't actually see any animals being killed in the book or anything like that, but we become very aware that this is a reality on the farm. And so I like that he cued the reader in right up front. What's really interesting toward the end of this first chapter, after they all, Wilbur is saved and the family sits down for breakfast, bacon is being served. And E.B. White doesn't even comment on it. He just mentions that there is bacon for breakfast. And I thought, whoa, I wonder how many kids picked up on that. But that is also just another layer of this whole theme of life on the farm. So it's very interesting how much he has woven into this first chapter. So here we are dropped in the middle of the action, and we open with a great line of dialogue, but there is so much else woven into this scene that makes it so incredible. Okay, another classic. This is one of my favorite opening picture book lines, Imogene's Antlers by David Small. On Thursday, when Imogene woke up, she found she had grown antlers. Okay, so let's pick this apart word by word, because the best first lines, you can do that and you realize every word was a deliberate choice. So we start with on Thursday. That's a much better beginning than one day when Imogene woke up. One day is just at some point, this happened sometime. This happened on Thursday. Okay, that's specific. That immediately helps the reader feel like, I know when this story took place. It took place on Thursday. When Imogene woke up. So Imogene is a great name. We don't hear that name a whole lot. I mean, this book is several decades old, but even when it was written, this was not a common name. Okay, that gives us a sense of the character. Okay, Imogene is a name that's kind of, it sounds like an old family name in a lot of ways. Okay, and that kind of helps create the atmosphere that Imogene is living in. And as we go on in the story, we see that this is a kind of a well-to-do, proper family. And so the name helps set the stage for that. She found she had grown antlers. My favorite part of this whole sentence is the verb found. Think about that. Think about if there was a different verb there. She discovered she had grown antlers. Well, it almost says the same thing, but discover is something you go out and do. You are actively seeking. She found she had grown antlers. This just happened to her. It's a much more passive verb. And often we say you want active, not passive verbs. But this was a deliberate choice. And the other thing is it's a very calm verb. She is not horrified about this discovery. She's not worried about this discovery. She simply found that she had grown antlers. That creates a very specific tone to the book. And again, it tells us a lot about her. So then he doubles down. Getting dressed was difficult, and going through a door now took some thinking. Okay, it's a little challenging, but it's not she struggled to get dressed. She just had to figure it out. And she wrestled the antlers through the door. No, it just took some thinking. So you see how the tone is continued and enhanced throughout this opening. He follows through with it. And then in the next few pages, we see her sliding down the banister of the great central staircase to breakfast, and she's got a big smile on her face. So she doesn't have a problem with these antlers. Now, that sets a very interesting premise to the book, because we know you can't have a story without a problem, right? So if Imogene doesn't have a problem with them, someone else does. So this creates anticipation. Kids know that, you know, by the time they're having this book read to them, they've had a few picture books under their belt. They know someone's got to have a problem with these antlers. And if it's not Imogene, then they are anticipating who it might be. And that makes the book even funnier when we find out who that is. Okay, one more classic, and then we'll move on to more modern books, because this is also one of my favorite beginnings ever. And again, I'm sure it's one you all have heard of, from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler. Claudia knew that she could never pull off the old-fashioned kind of running away. That is an excellent first sentence. First of all, we know Claudia is going to be our main character. We also know that she's planning on running away. And we know that she is smart because she knows she can't pull off the old-fashioned kind of running away. She knows herself. So already we know an awful lot about Claudia just from this first sentence. And then we double down with the first paragraph. Claudia knew that she could never pull off the old-fashioned kind of running away. That is, running away in the heat of anger with a knapsack on her back. She didn't like discomfort. Even picnics were untidy and inconvenient. All those insects and the sun melting the icing on the cupcakes. Therefore, she decided that her leaving home would not be just running from somewhere, but would be running to somewhere. To a large place, a comfortable place, an indoor place, and preferably a beautiful place. And that's why she decided upon the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Okay, so that's your first paragraph. The opening packs a punch. We double down with the rest of the paragraph. This is a book where we're starting by introducing the character. Okay, so I said that was one of your options when you are starting your book. But you can't just say Claudia was 12 years old. She went to this school. She liked this. She didn't like that. She had 3 brothers. Da 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 da. She lived in New York City. We'd be bored, right? What this does is it shows us an awful lot about who Claudia is. Not just what she likes and doesn't like, but how she's meticulous. She plans things. She likes her creature comforts. And she has a brilliant idea. She's going to run away to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So we know that's what's going to happen in this book. And it already sets us up for, it raises our expectations. It's like, okay, great. Now I'm looking forward to see how she's going to pull this off. And then she follows through, the author, with the rest of this opening scene, where she talks more about how Claudia planned very carefully. She saved her allowance. She chose her companion. So then we know that Jamie, the second youngest of her three younger brothers, is going to be going with her. And we learn why, because he's the one who's got some money. He could be counted on for keeping a secret. There's all sorts of reasons. So it continues in the same vein. We see how Claudia is so carefully planning this out. And it makes us go, whoa, this is an interesting character. She's really thought this through. And then we start wondering, she's clearly been planning this for a while. What could have happened that makes her want to run away so bad? So it raises questions in our mind, but they're interesting questions that we want to answer. Now, this book also has a preface of sorts. Now, prefaces are not as common today as they used to be in fiction. They used to be very common. Most editors, oops, sorry, I accidentally pasted the signature over the middle of the slide there. Most editors that I know prefer not to have prefaces in fiction because it kind of delays the reader from getting into the story. So you only want to do it if you absolutely have to. And if you do, you want it to be really, really interesting. So this is written as a letter from Mrs. Basilie Frankweiler, who is in the title, so we know she's an important character, to her lawyer, saying she wants to change her will. Okay? And her voice as a character comes through very, very clearly in this letter. So we're getting to know her a little bit even before Claudia meets her. And so that's interesting. And we know that she's going to change her will, and we're wondering why. And so you've planted this idea of Mrs. Frankweiler changing her will. She's probably got some money, right? And Claudia and Jamie. And we're like, okay, there's another intriguing question. How do their paths cross? So again, if you're going to have a preface, it's got to do this. You can't just describe the setting, or some authors try to work their backstory into the preface. No, a reader is not going to read it. Okay, here's Clementine by Sarah Pennypacker. This is a chapter book for ages 7 to 10. It's a whole series. The first one was published about 15 years ago, and then the books have been continually published since then. So here's the opening line. I have had not so good of a week. I love this. First of all, it immediately gives us the voice of our protagonist, Clementine, who is 8 years old. And the way her own unique way of phrasing things, I have had not so good of a week. And immediately we go, oh, I'm so sorry, what happened? So what the author is doing here, we're kind of starting with the character, but what the author is doing is she wants to generate empathy for this character. And so before we get into the action of the story, because Clementine doesn't always think things through very well. And we don't want to just think she's stupid. We want to have empathy for her. We want to like her before we start getting into the plot. So here is where we double down. I have had not so good of a week. Well, Monday was a pretty good day if you don't count Hamburger's surprise at lunch and Margaret's mother coming to get her, or the stuff that happened in the principal's office when I got sent there to explain that Margaret's hair was not my fault, and besides, she looks okay without it. But I couldn't because Principal Rice was gone trying to calm down Margaret's mother. So someone should tell you not to answer the phone in the principal's office, if that's a rule. Okay, fine, Monday was not so good of a day. So we're getting more and more of that voice of the character. and we're starting to, okay, there's some interesting stuff happened on Monday. I want to know how all this stuff came about. Now, if you really look at this, what this opening sequence here is backstory, because Clementine is looking back on Monday. And I said, you should not start with backstory. This is an exception if you can do it like this, because what you are doing again is setting up some empathy for this character, some sympathy, and also we're kind of like intrigued here. Okay, what did you do? Now, how do we make the transition from backstory to present story? She did that great in the next paragraph, which is a surprise because it started off with 2 lucky signs, which fooled me. First, there were exactly enough banana slices in my cereal, 1 for every spoonful. Then, as soon as I got to school, my teacher said, the following students are excused from journal writing so they can go to the art room to work on their Welcome to the Future projects. And I was one of the following students. So instead of having to think up things to write in my journal, which I hate, I got to glue and paint stuff, which I love. So at this point, the whole story's in past tense, but the first little bit was really sort of past tense backstory. Now we're in the actual story here. We follow her from this point on through her week. So that opening was just sort of her looking back on the week and saying, yeah, the whole thing was not great. Now, if we started here, if we started the book here and said, Monday started off great. First there was this and this and this happened. It's interesting stuff. We're still getting some of her voice. We're learning a bit about Clementine, but it's not that compelling. It's like, do I really want to read a book about a day that went great? No, that's not very exciting. So Sarah Pennypacker first tells us, it didn't go great. But then we start to see some good stuff that happens. So we know that it's not just going to be a whole list of grievances. There's going to be good and bad going on throughout this book. And again, we are hearing Clementine's voice. We're getting to know who she is very, very quickly. I love this picture book. Came out about 1.5 years ago. I just ate my friend. Okay. Here's the opening line. Mirrors the cover because you can't get any better than that. I just ate my friend. Okay. This is great. This is surprising. It's funny because of the delivery, and it doubles down through the illustration. Look at the expression on this creature's face, okay? He is clearly befuddled and dumbfounded that he ate his friend, which immediately shows us what kind of story this is going to be. It's not going to be a gruesome friend eating story. This is a story of someone who has made a mistake and is now suffering the consequences. Okay, it's funny, but it also, that expression reminded me so much of when our son Matt was like 3, and he would go to do something and we'd say, no, don't do that. You'll break it, or you'll get hurt, or you're not going to like what that tastes like, or whatever. And he does it anyway. And then they get this look on this face like, oh my God. They suddenly realize, oh yeah, there is a consequence to this action. And that's what this reminds me of every time. It is hysterical. So the tone is very even because it is a creature who did not expect this to happen. Now we double down. He was a good friend, but now he's gone. And now the tears start. Very, very preschooler-like. There's always that pause, and then it sinks in, and then the tears come. So it is really funny for little kids, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, to have this book read to them because they recognize their reactions in the story. But they get to laugh because it's absurd. The absurdity of the situation where you accidentally eat your friend is funny. And then, of course, we need to find a new friend for the creature, which is how the author follows through. The author is not going to have this little guy eat every friend in the book. Okay, we're gonna work on that. So, but setting the tone here is beautiful. And it's very simple. Now, some of you are probably wondering, if you just wrote this and did not do the illustrations, how would you let the illustrator know what's happening? You wouldn't, because if you just get this book and type out the text, you will see that the tone is very clear. These are declarative sentences. There's no serious emotion in them. It's very deadpan. And that would clue the illustrator in on how the picture should look. Of course, you and your editor would have a conversation about that before the book was handed over to the illustrator, and you might offer some, suggestions or whatever. But it's up to the illustrator to depict this creature. And if the illustrator instead drew it as, say, a crocodile who accidentally ate his friend, I think the book would work. What's important is the expression on the face, that dumbfounded, shock. Oh my God. That's what sells it. So that is going to be clear from the tone of the text. So we looked at a few ways to start your story. Now let's talk about where you're going to start your story. We talked about how, now we're going to talk about where. Ask yourself, what's the minimum amount of information my reader needs to know so they can understand the impact of the inciting incident on my main character? So the inciting incident is that moment where the plot starts. Something happens that shakes up your character's life and the story begins. How much does your reader need to know before we get to that moment to be grounded in the story? Generally, it's a lot less than you think. So that is why you don't want to worry about figuring out where you're starting until you've written the rest of your book. Just write a first chapter as a placeholder. And then you can go back and you can really look and see where your inciting incident is and say, how much prior information do they need? In the case of Charlotte's Web, 0. Okay, the inciting incident was the first line, because E.B. White didn't want the reader to know anything. They wanted that reader to come in cold, unsuspecting, just as Fern was. Okay, I just ate my friend. We don't need to know any previous information to that. That is the inciting incident. We get it. That is a problem. Now we're going to see how you solve it. Okay, but sometimes you need a little bit of information beforehand. So this is from a great YA novel called We Were Liars. And this is the first chapter, just these 2 pages. Welcome to the beautiful Sinclair family. No one is a criminal. No one is an addict. No one is a failure. The Sinclairs are athletic, tall, and handsome. We are old money Democrats. Our smiles are wide, our chins square, and our tennis serves aggressive. It doesn't matter if divorce shreds the muscles of our hearts so that they will hardly beat without a struggle. It doesn't matter if trust fund money is running out, if credit card bills go unpaid on the kitchen counter. It doesn't matter if there's a cluster of pill bottles on the bedside table. It doesn't matter if one of us is desperately, desperately in love. So much in love that equally desperate measures must be taken. We are Sinclairs. No one is needy. No one is wrong. We live, at least in the summertime, on a private island off the coast of Massachusetts. Perhaps that is all you need to know. Okay. Interesting. So this is being narrated in first person by one of the Sinclair family who is not happy with this facade that the family insists on upholding. How outward appearances are more important than divorce shredding the muscles of our hearts or bills piling up on the table. They're not really as rich as they seem. But all anybody needs to know is that they live on a private island off the coast of Massachusetts. So that is very interesting. That sets up a lot of the world in which this story is going to take place. And we need to understand that world before we get too far into the story. Plus, it gives us some sympathy for this narrator. who we haven't met yet. We don't even know if this narrator is a boy or a girl, but we have some sympathy. So this is the beginning of chapter 2. And I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but you can see that it's a lot of the character just introducing herself to the reader. And there are some interesting details here, but if you started the story with this, we would not be intrigued. We are intrigued because we started with the first chapter. And it looks like she's trying to paint herself as, I used to be sort of a normal girl, but now I used to be pretty, but now I look sick. I used to be strong, but now I am weak. There's a lot that happened to this person, and we think the family might have something to do with it. So now we're going to keep reading. And this is an amazing book. If you want a great example of an unreliable narrator, this is it. So this works with novels in verse. This is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. Now in this book, and in many novels in verse, this is the same setup. Each verse is essentially a chapter. So here's verse 1. Don't nobody believe nothing these days, which is why I haven't told nobody the story I'm about to tell you. And truth is, you probably ain't gonna believe it either. Gonna think I'm lying or I'm losing it, but I'm telling you, this story is true. It happened to me. Really, it did. It so did. Okay, so we haven't gotten to the inciting incident yet, but we need to understand that it's really important to the narrator that we believe him, because he's going to tell us something that is going to sound unbelievable. And that is intriguing, and we want to keep reading to see what that is. And then I'm just going to show you the next verse. My name is William Holloman. Sorry, it's blurry here. But to say my friends and people who know me, just Will. But to my friends and people who know me, just Will. So call me Will, because after I tell you what I'm about to tell you, you'll either want to be my friend or not want to be my friend at all. Either way, you'll know me. So he has doubled down on that first verse, which makes us realize how important it is that we listen to this story. And again, that is just really, really an intriguing way to pull a reader into a book. And finally, this works for nonfiction as well as fiction. So here's the opening of Sonny's Bridge. Jazz legend Sonny Rollins finds his groove. And this is a picture book biography of Sonny Rollins and his how he vanished in 1959 at the height of his career, and then had a comeback, and how this bridge played a big role in that. So, I talked about how the tone and the voice of the writing also needs to be evident in the beginning, and that helps set the stage for kind of what kind of story you're going to be telling. So this is a great example of that. This is a book about a musician, and the words flow like music. Misty night, summer night, East River, New York City night. You hear that? Hear what? That. Somebody's playing the saxophone. So what? So that's Sonny Rollins. That's what? Wait, what? That's Sonny Rollins? The Sonny Rollins? What the heck is Sonny Rollins doing on the Williamsburg Bridge this time of night? Nobody knows, man. Nobody knows, except Sonny. And he ain't saying. So there's a sort of a rhythm to the text, and it raises a question. If a kid doesn't even know who Sonny Rollins is, when you start reading this book to them, it's still intriguing because we know he's someone famous and he's on a bridge, and that's not supposed to happen. So what's going on here? And so I think that's a really intriguing way to pull someone into a biography, especially if it's a person that the reader might not have heard of. And finally, last example here. we have Bomb, The Race to Build and Steal the World's Most Dangerous Weapon. This is an amazing book by Steve Schenken. It's sort of upper middle grade, YA as well. It has a prologue. So prologues are often used in nonfiction because it might be really important to give the reader a little background as to the subject or the time period so they can fully understand what's going on in the book. He wrote this as if it's a mystery novel, and it's great. So this is just the first couple paragraphs of the prologue. So we have the date, May 22nd, 1950. We know what time, where we are, or at least when we are. He had a few more minutes to destroy 17 years of evidence. Still in pajamas, Harry Gold raced around his cluttered bedroom, pulling out desk drawers, tossing boxes out of the closet, and yanking books from the shelves. He was horrified. Everywhere he looked were incriminating papers, a plane ticket stub, a secret report, a letter from a fellow spy. Gold ripped the papers to shreds, carried 2 fistfuls to the bathroom, shoved them into the toilet, and flushed. Then he ran back to his bedroom, grabbed the rest of the pile, and stumbled on slippers down the stairs to the cellar, where he pushed the stuff to the bottom of an overflowing garbage can. The doorbell rang. Oh. In the next paragraph, FBI agents walk in. So it's like a spy novel, okay? And we know immediately Harry Gold is who we're talking about here. He's been doing this for 17 years. Fellow spy, that means Harry's a spy too. So we've gotten a lot of information just in these couple paragraphs, but we are riveted because it's being told as if it is a spy story. And it is a spy story, but it's true. So I love the way he set this up. And then Harry Gold kind of comes back throughout the book as sort of a marker. You know, we keep circling back to Harry throughout this entire book. Okay, I think that's all I got for now. So I'm sure you have questions. First, let me open up the chat box here. Yay, people love Clementine. So I'm going to, oh my goodness, there's nothing in the Q&A. Surely you have some questions. Or was I that riveting that you could not turn your eyes away? I doubt that very much. So throw in some questions there if you want. And also, if you have a favorite first line from a book that you want to type into the chat, let's look at it and we'll dissect it. So you're going to have to actually type the first line into the chat. You can't just give me the title of the book because I don't have all first lines memorized. So a lot of people are saying you liked it. Yay, thank you. It was a dark and stormy night. Okay, yes, that's from A Wrinkle in Time. You were that riveting, thank you. And that is obviously a cliched opening. And I think Madeleine L'Engle used that deliberately because it was a dark and stormy night. But if you read the next lines right after that, she gets completely away from the cliche. So she was, I think, doing that deliberately. And that can happen once. No one else can do that because she's done it. So if you do that, you will be derivative. Okay, so I see there are some questions in the chat box. Please put them in the Q&A so I don't miss them here. There's one. Okay, so I'll grab this one from the chat box. Does a first chapter of a chapter book generally introduce the main conflict of the whole book? Yeah, when we're talking chapter books, that's for that ages 7 to 10, and younger chapter books are for like 5 to 8. Yeah, you definitely want that primary story conflict to be introduced in that first chapter. You don't want to wait any longer than that because that's what gets your plot moving. And you don't want kids to wait for the story to really start longer than the first chapter. And if you can introduce it early in the first chapter as opposed to later, that's better. As we get into older readers, middle grade, and then of course YA, you can introduce that inciting incident or the main story conflict by the end of the first chapter. Often it happens right at the end of the first chapter, but you got to have a lot of interesting stuff leading up to it. And it's got to be necessary. So again, it's got to be stuff the reader needs to know so that they understand the impact of that inciting incident on your character. And if they need to know a lot of stuff to really understand that, then you can take the whole first chapter, but I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go longer than that. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, can you elaborate about doubling down? Yeah, so doubling down, it's just a term that I came up with. You create this emotional impact with your first line. It's either surprising, intriguing, funny, entertaining, riveting, several of those things. And then you've got to keep that emotion going in your following sentences. You can't just have this great first line and then start just describing the house that your character lives in when it has no relevance on what's going on in the story right then. It will dissipate all the emotion that you built up in that first line. So if you wanted to surprise the reader with the first line, then you want to surprise them again with a few more following sentences, as we did with Charlotte's Web, so that that emotion really sinks in and it is solidified in the reader. And then they're going to want to keep reading to find out what's going to happen after that. Okay, so Danielle says you touched on the differences between the older styles of books and newer books. Does this mean you should be putting that inciting incident on the first page most of the time? It depends on your story, okay? You don't have to put it on the first page. Again, it just depends on what the reader needs to really understand to understand the impact of that inciting incident. So in the example I read you from We Were Liars, we kind of needed to understand this family and how invested they were in outer appearances and their supposed lifestyle and all of that, to understand what's going to be the inciting incident a little farther down in the book, and how it's affecting our protagonist. So there's no one size fits all answer to that. It just, you want to start as near as you can to that inciting incident in every story. First chapter, yeah, I think as much as possible, getting it in that first chapter is really important. I have read a few YAs where the inciting incident's in the second chapter, but you have to have a really interesting character and other interesting things going on in their life to wait that long. So you're going to see some of those examples in YA. When we get younger, it's usually going to happen in that first chapter. In a picture book, it's going to happen within the first 3 to 5 lines of a picture book. What's the best way to open a chapter book story in diary format? That's a great question. I think the diary entry, well, first of all, a diary entry is a great way to show your character's voice. So it's a good device for that. But you want them to be writing about something interesting. And that would be a good place to put your inciting incident. Okay, why are we reading this particular diary entry? Something happened on this day that our protagonist is writing about. And I think that's might be a good way to open a story with a diary in the diary format. It's a long way down written in poem. Yeah, it's a prose poem. It is. That's why the words look. And I was doing a screenshot from the Kindle version and it just looked really blurry for some reason. But it is a prose poem. It's a great book, and it's also, the audiobook is awesome because Jason Reynolds narrates it. And it's really great to hear him reading his work like that. And it has an extra chapter at the end where he talks about why he wrote the book and that sort of thing, which is really fascinating. How do you figure out when the static description like We Are Liars did is okay? All right, so let's go back to that because that is a great question. Let me share my screen again. So I need to go back. Let's see. Okay. So this is that first chapter. Okay. Welcome to the beautiful Sinclair family. Normally that would feel like a ho-hum sentence, but our reader is being sarcastic about this. So we learn that, I mean our reader, our narrator is being sarcastic. And so we learn that very quickly in these next couple lines. She's it's not a beautiful family. So it's not really a static description. A static description would be something that just lays there on the page. It doesn't give us insight into the character. It doesn't show us how a character relates to her environment. It doesn't have plot points in it. It's just the Sinclairs lived in a white house with a picket fence and a backyard pool that was cleaned once a week by their pool guy. And, you know, that would be sort of a static description. This is not static. This is really showing us how the character is describing her family. And then if we go to the next page, this also would normally feel like a static description, but coming after that first chapter, we kind of get the sense that she's introduced us to her family. Now she's going to introduce us to herself. And she was showing us there's a lot of darkness in her family, and she's doing the same thing here. So again, it's not static. We're getting a lot of information. It is tricky to pull off what appears to be just a plain old declarative sentence at the beginning, and actually these first 3 sentences, and not have the whole thing just come off as really boring. So that's why we needed that first chapter. And now she's going to tell us, this is the proper stuff about me that the world sees. And then as the description goes on, we start seeing the parts that the world doesn't see. So it is actually very active in that it is showing us the character. Okay. Oh, now you got questions. Okay. Is it okay to start by pulling a scene from farther in the books, such as a high action scene to pull the reader in, and then go back to the beginning of the story? This is for a middle grade YA mystery. Yes, I have seen that happen a lot in mysteries. So certain genres that works for mystery, suspense, that kind of thing. You want to leave them on a cliffhanger at the end of that action scene, and then have a really good transition to the earlier part of the story. So there's got to be some connection between what happens at the end of that action scene and then how you begin chapter 2, which is really going back to the past and then working up to that moment. And so you have to find that. Otherwise, it doesn't flow. So if this is just off the top of my head, at the end of your cliffhanger, your character is being chased by rabid dogs and jumps off a cliff into a river. And as he's falling, he thinks, dang, I should have learned to swim. And then chapter 2 starts 3 months ago, when your character's mother was saying, I signed you up for swim lessons. You need to show up this time. Okay, that would connect us. Something like that. Okay. How do you ensure that you're writing for a particular age group, such as using the proper vocabulary, creating the correct length and complexity? A lot of that is just reading a lot of modern books for that age group, okay? There are very few books that have set vocabulary. Easy readers, which are for kids who are learning to read, sometimes do, but usually only if they're written for educational publishers. If they are written for trade publishers and they're sold in the library, in the bookstores, it's more of complexity of the words. So early level easy readers are going to use mostly one syllable words. Then we move up to level 2, you're going to have some compound words, and maybe your sentences get a little more complex. Level 3, you get more complex, etc. Picture books are meant to be read out loud to kids, so you don't have a controlled vocabulary. If kids can understand the vocabulary within the context of what's happening, both in the words and the illustrations, you're fine. So it is a matter of reading a lot of books and really, chapter book. And this is what we do in our writing blueprints, by the way, on writingblueprints.com. We break down this stuff for you. Chapter books for 5 to 8, they tend to have chapters that are about 3 pages long, and the paragraphs are anywhere from 1 to 4 sentences. Whereas when you have the chapter books for age 7 to 10, their chapters might be 5 pages long and their paragraphs get a little longer. So we break that stuff down in our writing blueprints. But also just reading a lot of these books is really going to help you do that and really break them down. Count how many sentences there are in the average paragraph. Count how many words there are in the average sentence, and you'll start to get a sense of this. Let's see. If you're writing a book series with a different theme each time, should you retain the same structure or style even though you may have a different lead character each time? Probably. If it is a series, there's going to be something that holds it together. There might be a common setting. There might be a common cast of characters, but they rotate who the protagonist is. There might be some device, like Babysitter's Club, that kind of holds the characters together. And there's going to be a structure to the stories. So that's part of what makes it a series. So yeah, I think it doesn't mean that you have to start each book exactly the same way, start with dialogue every time. No, but you're going to have a similar length to each book. If you tell the first one in first person, you're probably going to tell all of them in first person. So there will be some overarching similarities that create the style of the series. In a picture book, do you have to get to the problem in the first paragraph? No, but you should get to it within the first 3 book pages, which is, I don't know, within the first 50 words or so. And again, there's got to be a reason you waited that long. So if we need to kind of understand a little bit about this character before we see the impact of the problem, okay, you can take a couple pages to do that, but you have to do it in an entertaining way. You can't just describe the character. Remember, you're dealing with kids who are about either 3 to 5 or 4 to 8 years old in a picture book audience. And especially the younger kids, they're not going to have the attention span to wade through a lot of description and stuff before we get to the plot. Okay. Dylan says, hi, I'm Abigail, and this is my best friend, DJ. We have a magical story to tell you. Bet you didn't know that magic is all around us. This is the first line, Dylan, of a book. If so, please let me know, and we will talk about it. Looks like it's probably the first line of a book. So, hi, I'm Abigail, and this is my best friend, DJ. Kind of an ordinary opening. So you need to spark that up a bit. However, if this is an easy readers often open kind of like this because they're for kids who are just learning to read on their own. And they are a different beast altogether. We often ease them into the story a little more gradually than other books because kids are mastering reading the actual words. And so we don't want them to also be keeping track of a lot of action happening all at the same time. They need to get comfortable in the story first. That was an exception to the rule. We have a magical story to tell you. Okay, great. Bet you didn't know that magic is all around us. It's intriguing. For me, this opening is a little telly and not enough showy because a character telling me they have a magical story without offering me any evidence, you know, I might not believe you. I would rather you show me some magic and I'll figure out it's a magical story. So that would be my take on that particular opening. By the way, this is something I totally forgot to say earlier. A lot of great award-winning books don't necessarily have a great opening line. So it is not a guarantee just because a book has won a bunch of awards that you can automatically say, I'm going to use them as an example for an opening line. However, in those books, read the whole first chapter because they should have an amazing first chapter. So not everybody hits this every time. They just don't. But if you work on constantly doubling down and following through with the emotion that you are wanting to create in that opening, you are going to work in enough good stuff that you have a better chance of hooking your reader in that first chapter. Okay. This is the opening of the first page of a picture book for 3 to 5 years old. Okay, well, again, I would say I like that there's magic and that we have a narrator talking about the magic all around us. I'm not a fan, and a lot of editors aren't a big fan of characters just telling the reader how they should feel, or, you know, like I said, there's magic all around us. You didn't know that. Well, show me the magic and let me draw my own conclusion. So that gets into show, don't tell, which is another webinar altogether. But I like the tantalizing promise of magic. That's always good. The narrator's talking to the reader. That's okay. Second person, we're seeing more and more, especially in picture books. Second person is not that uncommon right now. So that can work. That could work. And it can be a good way to draw the reader into the story. Children's Writer's Word Book. Yes, Glynis, that is a great, to that question of vocabulary, and am I writing at the right grade level? The Children's Writer's Word Book is a great book because it kind of breaks that down a bit for you. So that could be a good resource for you. What do you think of a child as opposed to me telling the true story in a creative nonfiction picture book? It's tricky because if it's nonfiction, are you creating a child character to tell this story? The line between fiction and nonfiction is getting a little blurry these days, especially with picture books. So I'm not saying you can't do that, but I'm saying, and it might be a great way to tell this particular story that you are creating, but calling it nonfiction, you can do that in your query letter and cover letter, but understand that the editor might decide to call it fiction. And that is a call that every publisher makes a little bit differently. So I can't tell you across the board what it would be. But if you feel that that's the best way to tell this story, then do it. Just put in your cover letter that you created a fictional narrator to talk about this true story and see what the editor, what the editor calls it. But like I said, we have that blurring between fiction and nonfiction a lot right now. And what will tip it toward nonfiction is if you have back matter. So if you have extra information that you didn't work into the book, resources, author notes, cool facts, whatever, look at some, and I'm assuming this is a picture book, but it might not be, but look at some other nonfiction books in the same age group that you're writing for and look at their back matter, because that's very important right now. And that will help kind of tip it into that nonfiction category. Thank you, Dylan. Okay, so Melissa put a first line here. Bram, the sleek back crow, cawed to the girl who followed him and descended onto a bare branch. Okay, that's interesting because our main character here is going to be this crow There's a girl following him, and he cawed to her, which to me says he wants her to come toward him. He's communicating with her somehow. If it was cawed at her, it would be go away. He's cawing to her. And then he's descending onto the branch. So he's getting closer to her, I am assuming, in this first line. So I am very intrigued by that. I think that's an interesting first line, and I would be curious to see what happens next. Okay, Glynis. Galloping Gus, the big yellow bus, liked to sneak out at night from his shed after the driver, Simon MacGyver, thought he'd tuck Gus into bed. Nice. I like it. I love Galloping Gus. That is a great name for a bus. And he's so liked to sneak out at night from his shed. This is a great, and Linus, I know you said this was your opening, so very nice. I would just work on that verb liked a little bit. There's nothing wrong with it, but you can probably find a verb like to sneak out at night. You might find a slightly better way of phrasing that just sounds a little more interesting when we're hearing it when we're hearing it out loud. Look at synonyms for sneak out and like, and just kind of play with the language a little bit. But I think where you're starting and the rhythm and all of that is great. Okay, here's Melissa. On a misty night when the moon is full, you might glimpse the twinkling lights of the will-o'-the-wisps. Yes, that's a lovely one. So this is description, okay? But first of all, it's second person. The author is talking to the reader. So, and we don't yet know if this is a storyteller voice where there is sort of a fictional narrator narrating the story, or if it's the actual author writing in second person directly to the reader. Those things have yet to be seen. But someone is saying to the reader, you might glimpse this on a misty night when the moon is full. It creates an atmosphere, which is very nice. It's an interesting description. I think if we follow it up with action now, or something surprising that happens in the next line of description, we'll be okay. If it keeps going on as just a beautiful description, then we might have a problem. Okay, but as a first line, I think it's very appealing. It's very charming, and it's intriguing. Okay, one more. This is okay. From Melissa. A wondrous possibility takes shape and hums in my heart. It thrums and strums into a wild wish. Okay, that's interesting. It's intriguing. It kind of gives me a little bit of insight into the narrator and who this narrator, has a wild wish. And it's a wondrous possibility. So I like that. It feels a little too abrupt. It feels like I was dropped into the middle of a thought and I want to hear the beginning of it. So I want a sentence before this. And I don't know what that would be. It could be a little bit of action. It could be a thought from the narrator. I'm not sure. This feels like effect. So there's cause and effect. We have our scene and sequel. We have setup delivery. We have cause and effect. All of fiction writing is sort of this pattern. This feels like the effect part of the sentence, and I want the cause. I want the first beat. So just play around with that a little bit. But very nice. Okay. Little did I know how the knock on the classroom door on January 6th, 1958 would change my life. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, I think that's a great place to start a story, Mary. I think the date is relevant there if we are not in 1958 right now for the rest of the book. if there's a reason that we need to know that knock happened on that day and it was a long time ago. Okay. If the entire book takes place in 1958, then I would find another way to work the year in a little farther down. You can also give sort of details of the time period in the opening scene. But I think that's really interesting. I think foreshadowing like this can work, but we don't want to foreshadow too much. So after that sentence, I would want to go right into action or dialogue, put us right in that scene. But good. Okay. Oh my goodness, you guys. Okay, I'm almost done. I'll just answer all these because we don't have too many more here. Okay, here's another opening from Terry. Every day when Hing and Hong skipped and ran on their way to school, I followed, but carefully, of course. Their school bags carried a lot of things, but one was a special treasure. Okay, so it's an opening for a dragon picture book. So, because I don't know if the narrator is the dragon here and Hing and Hong are children skipping and running on their way to school. I'm assuming that's what it is. I think this is a really interesting place to start. I would again look at the language a little bit. Every day when Hing and Hong skipped and ran on their way to school, I followed, but carefully, of course. I bet you can work in that carefully following in that first sentence. So think about your verbs, think about, followed doesn't really tell us a whole lot. Was this character who was following slinking through the brush behind them? Was the character tiptoeing? Was the character flitting from shadow to shadow? How was this character carefully following? I would like a little more detail that helps me create a specific picture in my head. Their school bags carried a lot of things, but one was a special treasure. Okay, again, their school bags carried a lot of things. Well, everybody's school bags do. Okay. And I'm wondering if this character followed carefully because their school bags carried a special treasure. In other words, are we worried about breaking what's in the school bag? Is that why we're following carefully? So again, I'm a little bit confused as to exactly every detail that's happening here. I think it's a great place to start the book, but just really kind of work on how you present that information a little bit so it's clearer to the reader. Because you see, I have some questions, and you don't want me to have those kind of questions. You want me to have intriguing questions. But thank you for sharing that. Okay. Okay, Melissa just sent me the follow-up to that Will-o'-the-Wisp. Yes, that's very nice. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it gives us a character and we start seeing that this character had a problem. So nice. Okay. Okay, last middle grade. Okay. School stinks. My name is Tristan and they call me an ADHD kid. Mrs. B, my tutor, tells me that ADHD stands for absolutely dependable, happy dreamer. I like that. Okay. I think you're okay starting like this. They call me an ADHD kid. First of all, I want to know who they is. The adults call me an ADHD kid. The counselors call me an ADHD kid. My doctor calls me an ADHD kid. I want a specific they there. It doesn't have to encompass every day, but give me a specific. Where did this label come from originally? Mrs. B, my tutor, tells me that ADHD stands for absolutely dependable, happy dreamer. I like that. Okay, so far I see no conflict here. It's okay that Tristan is okay with this particular acronym, but I want to know in the next paragraph what's the problem going to be, you know. It might be, however, so and so, some classmate says that ADHD stands for, and then come up with something else and talk about how that got him into a problem. So you're setting yourself up here for a story that sounds a little too good to be true with this opening. So you can start here, but then you have to think about what emotion you want the reader to have at this beginning. And if it's, oh, isn't that nice? Everything's fine. They're not going to stick with your book. Doesn't mean everything has to be bad, but you have to have us feel something that is a little more interesting than, yeah, it's all good. Okay. Leg, said Grandpa. I had fun plans for Grandpa and me. Oh, sorry. Let me go back and read that completely. My leg, said Grandpa. I had fun plans for Grandpa and me. Well, this is interesting. And this is a hard one to judge because I don't know if this is a picture book, if it's a chapter book. It feels like the two lines are telling me different things. Is Grandpa's leg in pain? Is he playing a game where we're supposed to, climb on his leg and, they do that horsey ride thing like we do with little kids? I don't know. So I think I need a little more information here. Now, again, if this was a picture book and it was very clear from the pictures what is happening, okay, we could start with my leg, said Grandpa. I had fun plans for Grandpa and me. Again, I'm not quite grounded yet in time and place. Is this a special occasion? Am I staying with Grandpa for the weekend? Is it Grandpa's birthday? I don't know. So I feel I need to have a little more grounding in the story. And I think you need that in the second line. And fun plans, again, we work on our words. That's very general. I had exciting plans. I had secret plans. I had, I don't know, some other word. Sorry, my brain is tired. So just look at the language a little bit. But I think that has a lot of great possibility. Today might be the day I see my brother Arnold. Excellent dialogue to start with. I like that. I like that. And then we're gonna, it makes me have some interesting questions about what might happen. Okay. That's a picture book, the Grandpa one. Okay. So again, the illustrations might fill in a few of my questions, but think about that second line, some of the stuff I said about that. One day after the day before, Mother decided to go to the store. So that's yesterday, I think. One day after the day before. So is that today? Mother decided to go to the store. Interesting. It's clever. It's very clever. I'm not sure why you have to make me stop and think that first line and try to figure out what day you're talking about, if that's important. If this is a refrain that goes through the story, 2 days after the day before, Mother planned to go to the store, if that comes next, then it's kind of there's a math lesson worked into the poem. And so then it might work. But if that's not what you intend, what you're making me do is stop and think, okay, today's the day after the day before, that's today, before I even read the next verse. And you don't necessarily want to do that. So think about why you're doing that. It might be a very valid reason. And like I said, it might be a cool sort of math lesson you're working into the poem. In which case, okay, Mother decided to go to the store. Not that revolutionary of an activity, unless what she's buying at the store is really weird. So the third line would have to really amp up, up the ante there, and get me to feel something that is special to this story. So just think about that. Great. Robin's going to watch the recording. Should upper level books be illustrated at all? John asked, this is the last question. Yeah, nonfiction is often illustrated all the way through, and it's often with photographs, the older stuff. As far as novels, we are seeing more and more illustrations in books all the way through YA. Now, YA illustrations might be just a little bit of line art here and there. Graphic novels are, of course, very popular for all the ages right now. So there are not as many rules anymore as to what can be illustrated and what can't. So it depends on the story. It depends on if your book needs illustrations, if it's enhanced by illustrations. There's a lot of factors there. So just really take a look at what's out there, what's come out recently. Okay, well, I think that we're done. Oh my gosh, it is on. We've almost gone 2 hours. So thank you for hanging out with me so long. And I enjoyed talking with you. I hope you learned something tonight, and hope you come back next week and we'll have another interesting discussion. And I can't even remember who my guest is next week. I apologize, but you'll find out if you're on our mailing list. So thank you all. Have a good night. We'll see you soon.